Welcome to Brothers on the Board, the podcast where we become better teachers together. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. It's episode 12. We're here today to talk about some things that is extremely stressful this time of year, and that would be state testing. I'm here with my brother Wes, as always, and we are going to be talking today about ways that you can sort of get your students engaged in some activities, but also helping them with some testing strategies that will hopefully make their way to success a little easier. So, Wes, we're back again. It's test time. We're getting close, man.
We are getting very close. I'm going to go ahead and start this whole episode off by saying that this time change has got me messed up the spring and forward. Just know you're coming with a lot of energy, and I will try to match that energy on this episode, but you got it.
Hey, you got to bring it, man. This is a performance-based industry. It's like teaching. You got to bring the energy.
Yeah.
Listen, I will admit, throughout the day, I have randomly just realized that all the clocks, like the clock on the stove, right? It doesn't automatically update. So randomly, I'll be like, oh, it's only 3 o'clock. And then I'm like, no, it's 4 o'clock. Like, the Sunday scaries just keep getting worse and worse and worse.
Oh, yeah.
But yes, spring forward really sucks. It's not a good time of year. It's no bueno.
No,
not good.
Not. I have
good.
One single personal day left, just sitting there. I'm like, man, it would be nice.
It would be nice to not have to. Yeah, I feel you. So, testing. Obviously, you are 7th grade science, and you teach in Kentucky.
Yes.
So tell us, Kentucky tests 7th grade science or no?
We do. Yes, it is the only It's the only grade that tests science in middle school. So we don't test. They test in 5th for science, and then they test again in 7th.
Okay. Well, see, in Ohio where I teach, it's tested at the 8th grade. So science is not assessed at the 7th grade level. But ELA and math are, right? Like that's the two, right? That seemingly is every year, feels like.
Oh yeah, all the time.
It's when you get into a lot of those cross curriculum kind of activities where they're asking science teachers like, hey, do more reading with your kids, right? Yeah, I'm sure that you get that as well.
Oh yeah.
Do more writing. Like, don't just give multiple choice all the time. Do more writing, right? Like, you get that occasionally. I think if you're a science teacher or a social studies teacher, or even gym. Like, I've seen our gym teachers that have done stuff in the past, like 2-seek was what we call like paragraph writing. But it's kind of crazy. But yeah, we get a little wild with it. So. All right, today the goal is to discuss some testing strategies and activities that we can do with our kids to hopefully get some buy-in, to hopefully get them energized and hopefully help them understand the test, the concepts of the test, and what they can sort of expect on it, and just some ways that they can do better. So just to give you a little bit of background about myself, and this is going to be a brief shout out, over the last, I would say, 5 years now, I think 5 years, I've been working for a small little outfit called LEAP. I'm sure some of you may have heard of it before, but basically it is a test prep program that helps students prepare for the ACT. And I've learned a lot during my time with LEAP. Now, obviously, we're talking about state testing, and the ACT is very different, but I do believe that there are a few little strategies that are translatable, things that we can apply from that kind of demographic or that test. So, all right, let's get into some of these strategies. But before we get to that, actually, one thing I do want to point out, if you could follow us on Facebook. Yeah, here I go again. Let's do it again. Run it back. If you could follow us on Facebook, we would really appreciate it. I do also want to shout out everyone who commented on our Facebook posts and gave me some strategies that we could discuss on here. I am going to shout some of those out. I'm not going to say anybody by name specifically because I never know if that's something people want, but I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. If you have not followed us on Facebook, please do so. You can find us at Brothers on the Board. So, strategy number 1. Here we go. The old-fashioned, baby. The very first one, that whole keep and delete thing, right? We're eliminating answers here. We're increasing our odds. That is the absolute first one. But now here's the thing. How do we get students to actually do it, right? How do we get students to really understand how to eliminate answers, how to be able to look and kind of determine what's right and what's wrong? What are some little tricks and strategies we can use? From my experience, a lot of students prefer multiple choice because it's easy to pick an answer. The questions themselves are not easy. Right? Multiple choice questions are difficult. Wes, what do you think about that?
I would agree. I mean, you can definitely, like, in a short answer, you can kind of write your way around and
Yeah, there you go.
crap
There it
a
is.
little bit and get away with
You
it,
can
right?
get some
And I
points,
think
right?
you can get some points, yeah, but like multiple choice, like you know
You
it
either
or you
get it
don't
or you
know
don't.
it, right? It's either one or the other. Now, to be fair, multiple choice though is a 1 in 4 shot. So
But yeah, but it's a 1 in 4 shot, but that means a 3 in 4 shot getting it wrong. I mean, yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
so, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you really should be able to get it down to a 50-50, right? You should be able to eliminate down.
yeah,
But one of the issues I see is that students don't take the time necessary to get down to that 50-50. They start reading it. When they get done reading the question, they go, I don't know, C. And they just pick an answer and just roll with it, right? And I remember being a student,
absolutely.
man. I remember being a student. I did that more than I would care to admit, all right? Like, and I'm, that's one of those things now, right? Where I was not the best test taker when I was in school. And I probably was a little more apathetic than I should have been. And I'm pretty open about that with people. You know, my ACT score coming out of high school was not good. It's pretty ironic that I teach it now. But after going to college, I'm like, man, I should have done better on that thing. Probably should have put a little more effort into it. So yeah, getting students to eliminate answers is extremely important. So let's talk about some ways that we can do that. The first thing, and this was a suggestion from somebody on Facebook, and this was a math suggestion. They said to try to tell students to eliminate things that they know are wrong. Now, I know that sounds super obvious, but it's basically like this. If you have a question where you have a negative number times a negative number, if you know that a negative times a negative equals a positive, then you can eliminate all the answers that are negatives, even if you don't know specifically the answer, right? So eliminating those kinds of things. Another thing is like English. If it's an English-based question, you got to be careful. You don't pick a question with another mistake in it. And you get that, right? This may not be the exact answer that it wants, but like, hey, I know there's not supposed to be a comma here, right? So we can eliminate that answer. So shout out to my commenter on Facebook. I do appreciate that suggestion. Eliminating things that you know are wrong or make a new mistake. Another thing is an answer can be partially true, but be incorrect. So, Wes, I know that you're in the realm of science. Now, this is coming from more of a reading perspective. But is this kind of questions that you've sort of experienced or that you've had conversations with your students about?
You're talking about like partial correct answers? Yeah, where they'll, like, it'll be talking about Newton's laws, and an object in motion remains in motionless, acted on by an outside force, and like the first part will be there, like an object in motion will stay in motion, but then the second part they'll change or flip around or something,
unless it gets hit by a
where it's like
train,
partially correct.
right? Like it just throws something random in there.
It's all something completely random. Yes.
So I try to tell students that the passage is the truth, right? The passage is the truth. And the questions that's being asked, the answers that's being presented to you, 3 of them are lying to you in some way. It's like a lie detector test, right? 3 of them are lying to you in some way. So you may have a part of an answer where it's like, well, yeah, that kind of happened in the passage. But then another part may be, not so much. And at that point, you go, okay, it's out, right? If you have something that is lying to you in some way, you get rid of it, right? You lose it. So that's something that I like to tell students. Now, one thing that I think can be helpful for this, give students a passage, give them some questions, okay? Have them go through each answer, searching for pieces of the answer that is not correct or was not mentioned in the passage or is lying to you in some way. Like, have them put a box around it. Have them annotate the answers. I think that that's a useful exercise. And one thing that I think that you can do is have them do it in stations. Have them do it in groups. So get a list of your standards. Get a handful of small passages dealing with each standard. So, like, for example, in the world of language arts, it may be perspective, like point of view. Maybe we have a station about theme. Maybe we have a station about context clues. And we have stations for all these different skills. And then they spend about 10 minutes-ish, maybe 5-10 minutes per station, sitting down, looking at at a passage, looking at a few questions with their classmates, and then trying to go through. And we're not as much looking for the correct answer as much as we are trying to eliminate wrong ones. It's like, I don't want to just see that you're circling B because you know straight up the answer is B. I want to see what makes the others wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing that helps with that is just basic test corrections, right? You ever given an assessment and then you go back and you do test corrections and you like want them to explain why their choice was incorrect and why the other choice was correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the thing is, obviously, I'll give some quizzes and tests over, literature and books, things that we read, but for the most part, I'm essays, right? So test corrections for me a lot of times is rewriting or revisions. Usually is what it ends up being. But yeah, absolutely, it's all about understanding not just why you're right, but why the other answers are wrong. And multiple choice is a skill, right? You get better at it as you practice it. And if you can start looking for little identifying marks of things that make things wrong, then I think that's a huge step in terms of making your probability of guessing, if you have to, right. Okay. So I thought that was really interesting. Another one that was commented to us on Facebook that I thought was really interesting, and this is actually a teacher who works at my building, so he's going to know who he is. He suggested that in some situations, on some tests, the longest answer a lot of times is correct. And the reason is because, and I think this is kind of the way he put it, test makers, people who write tests, have a very difficult time not elaborating on the right answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as a person who has created tests before, I feel like it definitely is more difficult to come up with a incorrect answer sometimes than it is the correct answer.
It is definitely more difficult. I'm throwing something on there that's just completely ridiculous.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's just completely. Ever get to the answer D is always you get like your A, your B, your C, and then you're on the fourth one. You're like, oh, and then you just put something completely random, and then you have to go through and like
Shuffle
move
them
it
up.
to another option.
Yeah. Have you ever?
Because you're like, all of these D's are terrible.
Or have you ever like waited until the last answer to put the right answer multiple times in a row? And you're like, oh, I gotta move this one back to C now. Like, or I remember when I was in 8th grade, I had a teacher do this. He made every answer on the test C intentionally. So you have those people who just think they're crazy. The people who really start to second guess themselves about 5 answers in, they're like, no, this can't be another C. There's no way. And they really start to say, I had a teacher who did that. Or
that was
diabolical. Another thing is Have you ever heard of teachers who put in the directions, don't answer any questions on this test?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's like a traditional like first
Yeah.
day
Reading the directions, baby.
assignment.
We don't answer any questions. And you always got those
Yep.
few kids, or you got the rats in the room, right? The ones that look around and they're like, no, 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 don't answer the questions. Don't, hey, don't, look at the directions. And you're back there like, shh, shh, you're ruining it. Stop. Yeah,
the whole point.
So, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something to consider. But back to what we was discussing, the idea that a test could be looking for the longest answer. I think a lot of it depends on what kind of test it is, right? If you have an English test that is asking for something specific, so for the English test on the ACT, for example, some of the questions will ask which choice most vividly and specifically does whatever. Well, vividly and specifically, if that's what it wants, that usually requires words, right? So the longest answer in a lot of cases are correct. Now, with that being said, there are tests where the whole point of the question is to determine if you can communicate things as precisely and as efficiently as possible. And as such, your goal is to eliminate information. It's to choose the shortest answer. Like that's the whole goal of the question. So I would say maybe on some tests that could be the case. And when I did a little bit of research on it, I looked it up. It seems to be true. A lot of times, tests with the longest answers have a better probability of being correct, which is interesting. I think that's something to consider because I think we try to give students all the tools that we can to hopefully allow them to guess right if they have to get it down to a 50-50. It's just another thing that you can kind of weigh towards another answer, right? It's just like it tips the favor of like choosing this one, right? So yeah, appreciate it for everyone who suggested those things. They're definitely very, very helpful. So before we move on to our second one, the first one was a little long-winded. We had a lot of things to discuss there. Eliminating answers, who would have thought you could do so much with it? But before we get into our next one, I'm going to throw out my Facebook request one more time. I do appreciate my people who have already followed our Facebook page, but ultimately it just comes down to we want to connect with you. We want to discuss things with you. We want to learn from you as well. And it's things like this that lets us do that and lets us have these types of conversations. So we really appreciate it if you would head on over there right now and follow that page. All right.
Brothers on the board,
Brothers on the
baby.
board. All right. On to our next one, which is annotations. Wes, what kind of annotations do you do in science? Do we mark up the passages?
Oh my goodness, yes, we mark up all because science we have lots of information, right? Lots of data tables, charts, graphs, reading passages as well included in there. So this year in particular, I've done annotations probably 2 to 3 times a week in my class. They're always annotating, and I'm telling them, put your thoughts on the paper. You mark up, you need to be adding things like, hey, this stat is interesting. Maybe it's something that's important. Highlight it. We are doing a lot of annotations.
Do you do any kind of specific system, or is it just you kind of do what you think is best in terms of marking of the passage?
So my system has always been, we do color coordination with highlighting passages. Most of my passages are online. We don't do a lot on paper now. So we use Kami. So I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I've heard of it.
Kami. Yeah, you can upload like any PDF or any document to it. It's awesome. And then it makes it a editable file for all the students. So
okay.
I always do color.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. So I upload all my stuff into Kami, and then they go through and highlight. So we do, you could, as long as you keep it a common across the board. I feel like the system works. You need to kind of have like some school buy-in though. But I do like blue for information that they think that's just interesting, like facts that like they think are interesting. So they'll highlight it and then they have to put like they annotate the side of it why they think it's interesting. I always tell them put the why, like put your thoughts on the comment next to it. So that's just the interesting stuff. Yellow is any facts that they think is going to help them answer the questions, because we always do the whole read the questions first, then go back to the passage. So yellow's facts, that's going to help them answer any questions. And then red is just any information that they don't really feel like it's going to be necessary. So they go ahead and knock off any information they don't need.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and while I'm listening to you discuss that, I'm thinking about, I'm sure there's people out there who are thinking like, why is that useful, right? What's the point of really putting the why into it? And the reason for that, and I'm going to elaborate on this method in just a minute. The reason for that is so that people are aware of their own learning and their own reading. So I want everyone to kind of think about this. Let's do this little exercise, everybody. Everybody just chill out. All right, we're going to do this little exercise real quick. So I want you to imagine all the times that your spouse or a friend or anybody was talking to you, okay, about anything at all, and they say something to you and you hear them. You heard what they said, but when they ask you, hey, did you hear me? You're like, yeah, I heard you. And they're like, okay, well, what'd I say? And you're like, I don't know. Right? You heard it. It went one in one ear and one out the other. That is the difference between hearing and listening. You can do the same thing with reading. You can read an entire passage and have no clue what you read. I can read an entire passage right now and play a video game in my head the entire time. I can read an entire passage and think about what I'm going to have for dinner. No problem. By the time I get to the end of it, I don't have the slightest clue what it said. I remember doing that many times as a student. So what this does is it helps students check themselves. It helps students be metacognitive about their learning, right? About what they're reading, so that they're aware and so that they comprehend. So I'm going to piggyback kind of on what you said and move to a strategy that I think is kind of similar. So obviously my experience comes more from the ACT, where time is a problem, right? You don't have all the time in the world to mark up everything that you would want. So what I have students do most of the time, especially if they have issues with time, and but I think this could work anywhere. It's just that you can do it more if time is not a problem. Is at the end of each paragraph in a passage, write 1, 2, 3-ish words next to each paragraph saying what that paragraph was about. Okay. So what that does, so maybe it's a biography. You read the first paragraph and you're like, oh, that's this is early life. So I'm going to write early life next to it. Oh, this is the setting of the story. I'm going to write the setting, introduced to the setting. Oh, this is the conflict. This is where he has a problem. I'm going to write the problem next to the paragraph. And what that does is by the time I'm done reading the passage, I have two things going for me now. Number one, I have a little index next to each paragraph showing me where information is. So when I start answering questions, I can easily refer back to it. It helps me compartmentalize information and know where things are located. The second thing that it does is it keeps me on track. If I make it to the end of a paragraph and I go to write my 2 or 3 words and I don't know what to write, I wasn't paying attention. I got distracted. I was thinking about bacon for dinner that evening. I was thinking about something completely random. And now I may need to go back and read that paragraph again because I clearly don't know what it said. So I think that annotating is extremely important. So here's the question. How do we get students to do this? Right? How do we get the buy-in? That's the problem. Now, I will say that everybody's different. What works for one person may not work for another. So you can always try different annotation strategies. So do this. Give each student a passage and do timed readings. Take about 8-9 minutes, have them read a passage, and have them annotate it. See what they can remember. Have them question each other about it. Work with small groups after. Do it at a level 0 first. Have them annotated, and then give each kid questions that they can ask one another. Then Do the same thing with another passage, only this time try a different annotation strategy. Have them underline information that they may think is important. Have them circle information in the passage that may be good. Right? These are all things that we can do to help students remember information. And I think by having them work together, have them question each other, you create engagement. You create a sense of unity or a sense of belonging. It's a way of just making things a little more interesting. So, Wes, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, if anyone has listened to this podcast at all, they know that I'm all for, group work and working in a classroom, making it more of a group effort rather than just like individualized instruction. So I'm all for it. I'm all for working with groups. Anytime you get a chance to talk to another person, obviously, and question and work together, I feel like you're going to get more accomplished. So I definitely think that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I agree.
Haven't done it. I haven't done it. Something I may implement. I may implement that in my class. I've never done group annotations.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's something you could do. What's also interesting is at the end of the session, have them compare each other's annotations, trade papers, and see what did other people underline? Did they underline similar information? Did they say similar things about it? Right? We're looking at, it's almost like watching someone work through a problem out loud. They're explaining their thinking as they go, right? I think it's helpful. I definitely think it's helpful. Now, for all you people out there who are saying, hey, group work's fine, but this is a test. We got to be quiet. We can't be talking during the test. Well, how are we going to prepare kids for a test? They're working in group work. And we have to sit quiet for an hour and a half. You know what I have to say to you? You are absolutely correct. You are 100% correct. So my school has this kind of push towards group work. And on a daily basis, most of the things that we do is collaboration in some way or another, whether it's partners, whether it's in small groups, whether it's in some kind of station activity where we're moving around, gallery walks, all the hits, right? Whether it's something like that or not, it doesn't matter. It's a problem when it comes to testing, right? Because stamina and student endurance is a problem, right?
And we've discussed this where even in the last 6 years of me being a teacher, right, year 7, like I feel like student stamina has decreased.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
From my observations.
I agree. You have students who genuinely, like, they cannot sit quietly or still for an hour and a half. And it's like, oh, like, what am I going to do? Did I tell you the story about what Nolan said the one time in the car? Nolan is at the time he was like 4, I think. So we're coming home. I'm bringing him home from school, and he's in the back seat, and he's like, "Daddy, can I watch your phone?" And I'm like, "No, buddy, my phone's dead. You can't watch it right now." And he's like, "Well, what about my iPad?" I'm like, "But buddy, your iPad's at home. Like, I picked you up from school. I don't have your iPad with me. It's at home. I don't have it." And he goes, "Well, what am I supposed to watch? Like, nothing? Look outside, the trees. Like, look out the window like we used to do when we were kids."
Do what I did when we were on a long vacation, a long drive with our family. I would stare out the window and look at and imagine Sonic the Hedgehog running across the electric lines.
I did that too, dude. I was always a Super Saiyan. I was flying alongside the car. I was always blowing up like buildings. I was like blowing up trees and mountains, and I was like 10, give me a break, but it's like no hope for humanity. Not a care in the world, just blowing everything up with my super Kamehameha everywhere. Like that was always me. But that's the thing with Nolan, right? I'm looking at him and I'm like, it's me. I'm the problem. This is the issue, right? He can't sit. We live 10 minutes from his daycare. Like, it's not far away. So it's
and he has to have that stimulus, man, like all the time, right?
I've got that way too. Dude, the other day I was getting ready to go to the bathroom. Amelia, my wife, was like, she was on my phone. She plays Monopoly Go. I think that's what it's called. Like, if it's wild. She plays her account. She plays my account because I don't play. She plays it on my phone. So she's in there. She's playing on both of them. She's got both of them up. She's doing her thing. And I'm like, hey, I need my phone. She's like, hang on, I'm busy. I'm like, I gotta go. I gotta go to the bathroom. Like, I gotta go. And she's like, what? I'm doing this right now. I'm like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to be? Do you want me to just sit there? Just, this is unacceptable.
We don't have magazines to read in the bathroom anymore. What are you going to do?
Pictures don't even move. What are we talking about here? So
that's when you get at the back of the shampoo bottle.
I've done that. I've done that. I've read, warning, this product may contain. Yes, I have done that. Dude, I wonder how many people have done that. I think everybody's done that. Everybody has to have done that.
Hell yeah.
Dude, there was a point where I could probably tell you every ingredient, like back when we were home, like the dad's scentless deodorant. I would just be like, I was like, reading hunting magazines. Like, I didn't even really hunt. They were just there. It's like I learned how to skin a deer while using the bathroom. But anyways, yes, this idea of students being unable to work at a sustained level of peace and quiet for a length of time is a problem. So I do think that we have to sprinkle in some activities that gives them this independent work and really just work on stamina. And it may just boil down to reading passages, right? We're just going to read quietly for 30 minutes, and we're going to have a conversation about it. You know, we're going to do a reading log. We're going to do a on-demand essay. We're going to do a extended prompt, extended response. Right? We're going to do one of these things. And I do agree that is something else that you have to kind of start doing as you get closer to testing.
Yeah. And like you said, like, I know you mentioned this earlier, but like, that's where you chunk it into, everyone starts out at a level 0. We're going to do this for a while. Then we're going to go to a level 1, right? I always say, like, this is your time to think on your own. We don't want to hear what you're thinking, right? And then you're going to share it out later. So you progressively move through those levels. Level 1, then now we're talking as a group and sharing ideas as a group. And then in science, a lot of the times it turns into making a model. So you're doing like a group model. What did everyone put down on their model?
Yeah.
Right?
Do your kids randomly scream like they don't have an internal monologue? Everything is out loud. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, I'll have a kid, I'll be talking and they'll be like, my leg itches, and then they'll scratch it. And I'm like, why did you need to say that? You could have just scratched it. They scream their thoughts. It's wild.
Oh yeah.
12-year-olds, man. They do it all the time.
All the time.
But yeah, it is an issue. Students definitely need time working independently and having really just practicing not being able to talk to people. That's not having help. That's really because you can't help them. You can't help them. They have to get used to that. Which brings me to my next point. When it comes to extended response and essay questions, it's time to take the training wheels off, baby. It's time to get those screwdriver out. Take those training wheels off. No more sentence starters today, friends. No more. Nope, we ain't doing none of that. No more outlines from old Mr. Howard on the board showing you how to answer the question. I don't think so, Scooter. You're doing this one on your own. So it's time for me to just give you a question and just let you go. And let's see how you do. Let's see how you do. Now, what we do right now is I will give them an on-demand essay or a prompt of some kind. They'll answer it. And during this specified time, I'm not helping you. Right? I'm getting you used to working without me. I'm tossing you out of the nest. It's time to fly, little bird. It's time to go. So I want to see what you can do without me. Now, once we get done with it, we'll go back and we'll look at it. I'll conference with you. We'll talk about what you did wrong, what you did right, things that you can do better, right? But while you're working on it, I need to see what you can do on your own, right? Is that something that's is that a focus in your school, or is that something that's discussed?
As far as the school goes, not so much, but I mean, I have focused on that, like on summative assessments. I just gave actually this past week. I gave a 3-day long summative assessment. It was a
beast.
behemoth. It was a beast. It was like Wednesday was a lab that they did. Thursday was Thursday, and it was part 1 of the test. Friday was part 2 of the test. It was like 4 CERs. It was crazy. It was wild. Open side curriculum is very rigorous. So
yeah, we use a curriculum called Wit and Wisdom. Is also pretty rigorous.
Yeah, it is very rigorous. But anyway, it's crazy because like the lab, right? We've been doing labs for the last like 6 weeks, and it's always starts out like I give them the materials. All the materials are at the desk. I'm like, all right, so we're gonna start here, step 1, and then we're gonna add the substance here. We're gonna measure this. We're gonna do this. And there's like steps laid out. Well, this one, it just said plan an investigation to blah 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 blah. And it was like I handed it to them, and that like immediately
I
they're
know,
like,
right?
What do we do?
Did you read the directions?
Yeah, and I'm like, it's a test. I can't help you. Good luck.
Can you tell me what this word means? No. No, I cannot.
No. Well, the thing was, what cracks me up more than anything is we have a word wall in my room, and it has, and the word soluble. I can't tell you how many kids was like, "What's soluble? What's that mean? What's that word mean?" And I'm just like,
you're like,
I'm just like
pointing at it, just scratching your nose.
I'm like, look at the word wall.
Yeah, it's
on
there,
the word
buddy.
wall.
Like, it amazes me that how many kids just they don't read the board or the wall, any kind of word wall posters. Like, we do a lot of sentence starters, we do a lot of outlines, and a lot of kids are like, what do I do here? And I'm like, well, you read the directions. That's the first thing that you do. I wrote them for a reason. I'd appreciate it if you would read them. So, yeah, absolutely. Got to take them training wheels off. Got to get them used to working without you. It is getting close to that time, obviously, depending on which state or district you live in. Wes, when's your testing?
We haven't got official confirmation yet.
Is it in April?
But it is April.
Okay, ours is mid-April too. Which, an entire month and a half after testing, we still have school of, got to get ready for the 8th grade now, I guess. So
Yep.
yeah. All right, one more final strategy, something that I think is really useful. It's called pointing. Sounds silly, sounds a little ridiculous. When I first read about it, I was like, this sounds juvenile. It seems silly. So when I first started tutoring for the ACT, I was crushing the English. I don't mean to toot my own horn. I was doing great with that. Reading, still good. I was making progress. Not quite as easy for me as the English was. But brother, the science, it wasn't easy for me to teach at first. I've got better at it. But at first it was a little more difficult. And I ran across this strategy called pointing. And I first read about it and I was like, what is pointing? But then as I read more into it and I started doing it myself, I'm like, wow, this actually is helpful. So here's what it is. You take your 2 index fingers, your right index finger and your left index finger. Wes, you're going to be like the models on like The Price is Right or something. You're going to demonstrate for me here. So you take your 2 index fingers. Then as you read a question, when you come across a variable, a statistic, a graph, or anything else that you need to look at to answer the question, you stop. You don't continue reading the question. Yeah, you halt, you stop. So let's imagine this is an example question from the ACT. Let's imagine the question said, suppose that the students had performed a trial in study 2. Now, when it says study 2, I stop. Now, take my left finger and my left index finger. I'm going to go over here to the graph that I'm looking at, or the graphs that I'm looking at, and I'm going to find study 2. I'm going to put my finger on it. Then I'm going to start reading again, in which y was 2.6 centimeters. Okay, we got another statistic. I'm going to take my left index finger now. I'm going to move it from study 2 to y, and then I'm going to find 2.6. I'm going to put my finger on it. Then I'm going to keep reading. The value of v in this trial would most likely have been what? At this point, my left finger is literally pointing to the answer. And if it's not, it's very close. So what this does is when you have questions about graphs or questions about paragraphs in some situations, just anything where you're having to dig for information, it helps you eliminate a lot of the useless information. Because let's face it, if you're doing a passage or a set of questions about a multitude of graphs or an experiment or a study, 99% of the information over here is useless to you because you really only care about the information that is useful to you, that answers the question. So this helps narrow things down. Wes, is this something that you do, or is this something that you can take back to science class?
So this is something that I do. I demonstrate this a lot with students, right? I have never heard it called pointing.
Well, you
I
have
will
now.
say that. I've never. Yeah, when you said pointing, I was like, what? Yeah, absolutely. Read the question using your finger specifically. Go find where it's talking about. Point at that. Because in science, there's so much
Yeah.
information on the test. And again, like you said, a majority of it is not needed, not necessary. I always tell the students that, like, especially with ACT, that you don't really have to know a lot of science to do well in that ACT.
No, it's not science. It's a reading test. There's a reason that I'm teaching.
The information is there. The answer is there.
Yep.
It is in the passage. They are giving you the answer. You just have to figure out how to get it. For most of them, yeah. I mean, occasionally there's some background information you may need, but for the most part,
I think on
it's
average,
there. And you just
on
have
average
to know
on
how
the ACT, I think there's like 4 or 5 questions that are considered prior knowledge questions, where you have to know something in order to answer it. But the other 35 questions, they're there somewhere. You just gotta dig for them. So, yeah. All right. What I would like to do now is one more time with that Facebook request. Hit us up over there. Make sure that you go over, follow us, shout us out, talk to us. We would love to hear from you. We love feedback. I love hearing from people that listen to the podcast. I love hearing kind of what you think about these episodes. We genuinely hope that this information is useful to you in some way. This has been the goal from the start when we made this podcast, was how can we do things to make student and teachers' lives easier? And this is something that, whether you agree with standardized testing or not, is here to stay, and hopefully it can help you guys moving forward. Good luck as you continue to prepare your students for the upcoming testing season, and we will see you next time on Brothers on the Board. Have an excellent week.